I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 10. So last episode we got into Just Dire Things, and today we're actually going to be extending our Just Dire Things by hopefully, by the end of today's episode, getting ourselves a wand that allows us to tick accelerate blocks. Now, fair warning, this is not going to be a trivial task, to say the least, as it is 100% going to require quite a bit of logistics and also knowledge of the mod. Oh, and there's also going to be a little bit of waiting involved. Now, you may be wondering, Chosen, why are you going this route? Isn't there a time in a bottle? And there is a time in a bottle, but let me just say how long this actually takes to make. Right? You need the top tier productivity omega upgrades from bees. This requires you to farm the draconic bees and you need to wait. It also costs unobtainium. This is a lot of waiting in general there too. And it also costs a Neptunium pick, which means you need to fish for the Neptunium or the chance to get this pick. You also need Isnium, which requires you to go through occultism, which in my opinion is the whole reason why I would want something to accelerate in the first place. So yeah, I think this is a much better option. And I think the big question is it worth my time? Well, I think so. Oh yeah, and not to mention that the Insta Break feature of the pickaxe, yeah, the Insta Break does require the time crystals as well. So I would really love to have that. Now, before we get started with all of that, I do want a place to set this up. And I think it'd be kind of cool to have this showcase like sort of up here. But what I'm working on is a sewer. If you remember last episode, I did mention that I want to create a sewer. So I'm going around here right now and I am using ours to dig out an area, a trench. This is going to be 2 deep, give or take, and I'm going to texturize it quite a bit. And then we're going to have an edge that runs out here. This is going to be the side. The goal though, is to also have some ports like inlets that are going to allow water to flow in, and this is going to be filled with water. Remember, I'm building a sewer, and this is going to be, I think, one of the first times I've ever built a sewer in Minecraft. So I do have some interesting plans, and yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty fun project. Real quick, I did want to say, if you're building your own creations in your All the Mods 9 playthrough, definitely pop on over to my Discord, discord.gg/ChosenArchitect, or you can find it listed down in the description below, and definitely post it in the image gallery channel. You can even @me if you want, and I check that almost every single day, and it really does inspire me when I see the stuff you guys are building. So check that out, and while you're doing that, might as well give this video a huge thumbs up and also click that subscribe button. Yeah, come on. Thank you. I don't know about you guys, but I have loved sharing my building journey so far with you guys. This has been a really fun project. Like between the castle, also working on this tech laboratory down here. I don't know, I'm having a lot of fun doing this and showing you guys all the tips and tricks that I enjoy using when I build. I know that at the end of the day, like the idea is to progress through this mod pack, and that's kind of how it is for a lot of people. That you just want to kind of progress, but there's something about still building in Minecraft that I find to be the main focus or goal of why I play Minecraft in the first place. I mean, we're given all of these tools, right, to make more blocks and do more things. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's so that way you have those blocks and freedoms to be able to build what you want to build. So I know time crystals are definitely on your mind at this point, and you're maybe wondering, well, how do I make those time crystals? Hold on, real quick. I do want to show you some blocks that I'm actually using for this. So massive stone bricks are being used here, and then I have some factory blocks that are the vents. So this is the vent version of a factory block right here, old vents. I think this looks really cool. As like a nice dark, like broken rock texture, even though this is technically meant to be like sheet metal. And then I'm using tough, sanded tough right here, mixed with massive tough bricks, kind of lining the edge. And I'm also using the massive bricks and kind of separating these textures a little bit by making them intersect like this. And then the bricks are also splitting up more of this flat texture by me placing them every other block. And then I'm going to go in here with more of those mud bricks to kind of match the rest of the build. And man, this makes it so crazy that I can just exchange all of these blocks so quickly. Okay, so progression update so far. I just need to start doing like dev logs essentially. But I've started to build this out. I've got all of the mud bricks laid on the ceiling, and it is pretty dark in here. but things are going to get a little bit brighter. I'm starting to add the scaffolds like this, or the framing, to kind of keep up with everything else. And then on top of this, I've got to go down here and add the top blocks here and here. I don't know, I've been focusing a little bit more on the building aspect of things, at least earlier on in this series, and kind of foregoing like the really intense like super progression, because I don't want to underbuild and then out-mod the builds, which basically means I would start building things and building mod setups outside of my area here, and in my opinion, it makes me not want to move anything, because then I'd have to go, oh man, I got to move this setup, right? I don't want to do that. I want to get some sort of build infrastructure in, and then I want to start building my mods stuff inside of the build. I think I had mentioned that last episode, that if you just don't have enough space for your stuff, it can become pretty overwhelming whenever you realize, oh man, you need a lot of space. And so this right here should definitely account for all of that. This is just simply laying out a trench, and then I have access to all of this space to be able to clear out and make custom rooms that I can put mod stuff in. And we have all of our applied energistics automation in the center point, which is going to make it even better. Now, while this does look like a massive project, I can promise you that it is feasible to set all of this up. All of these building materials, by the way, that I am using in this build have come from the extractors. So just utilizing some different texturing methods, utilizing the chipped mod, I have been able to set all of this up. Of course, the factory blocks, those come from the classic, beautiful factory mod. I think it's called Factory Block Rechiseled. I think that's what it's coming from, right? Just factory blocks, right? These are just fantastic. And I mean, since iron is basically infinite, so good. So I'm almost done with this area. I've just got to add the water in. Easiest way to do that is by simply using like a tank, and the water will just slowly but surely fill in, especially when you have a tank like this. And then if you run out, you just right click a whole bunch, and there we go. We got even more water. So now with the building part out of the way, I do want to show you what the finished product sort of looks like. So I added some lily pads and some slime blocks here, and I'm also utilizing these illuminated fixtures, or illuminate fixtures from Simply Lights. Around the edge, removed all of the other light sources, so we have a nice contrast with it being dark on the roof and nice and bright and sort of subtle brightness here in the center, with all the water and flowing in from these inlets. So now for the difficult part, right? We are going to automate time crystals. And I want to do the time crystal initiation right here. And that means we need basically a 3x3 area to do this in. And this sounds kind of interesting, right? At the moment, you may be wondering, well, how's this even work? Well, we are going to be able to basically automate what is essentially an amethyst bud, but it has to be teleported into multiple different dimensions. And we can do all of this with the Just Dire Things mod that we got into last episode. Now, this is a really, really cool automation setup. And like I said, it's going to give us tick acceleration possibilities. So I think this little spot right here is going to be perfect for that. And if we know how a bud works, essentially we have a block in the middle and crystals grow off the side. And what we need to do is make sure we can teleport a block with crystals growing on it into different dimensions. Now wait, hold up. How would we teleport a block or anything like that into another dimension? Well, let me introduce you to the block swapper. Now, a block swapper works in some interesting ways. By default, it can teleport items and things like that from one position to another, including cross-dimensionally. Now, this is the simple version of it, and the way we link it is we right-click, and then we right-click another location to bind that to that location, right? And then we can also rotate this, right? So as of right now, if it's green, it now says these two are bound together. That's just simply right-clicking. Now, if you go into the GUI, you can see right here, it targets blocks. So let's go ahead and test that with a block of inferium, for example. I place the inferium on here, and it needs a redstone signal. It will teleport it to this block. And I can also give it another redstone signal to pull it back. Pretty cool little device. But this is just the simple one. And the simple one has some limitations, right? We can't do more than just one block. Now, some other things that it can do, you can have it target entities. So you see no entities, target hostile, passive, or you can just say all entities. And in that case, believe it or not, it can actually teleport us, which is a pretty darn cool, right? I find this to be a really, really cool feature, right? And then teleport back, we need to make sure this one also is set to all entities. And then we can rotate back and forth, right? Well, I think we have to apply the redstone from the source at that place. Now, getting the redstone source is something we're going to talk about in a little bit, but let's first go ahead and make the advanced version of this swapper. Now, the advanced swapper gets a little bit more expensive, requiring Eclipse alloy and also the simple swapper originally, meaning you're going to have a bit of gold. And I've been doing all of this by hand, also some blaze with the eyes. So yeah, this can get kind of expensive. But for this automation, I think we only need 6. Now, by the way, I did want to show this because we are going to need these coal blocks because I want to make a settings copier. This is actually something you can do, and it's actually used later on to make some liquid fuel. But primal coal is what we need. So just dire things right here. And I want to make a machine copier. This is going to make life a little bit easier. So I have all 6 of these swappers made, and I've also got my room set up. So the way this is going to work is in each dimension, I'm going to have basically a room like this that is set up. So in the bottom down here, we are going to have an advanced swapper that's right here, an advanced swapper that's in the roof. Now, these are all going to work differently, right? So this swapper is actually going to link to the other dimension, and this is going to be the one that actually teleports the block, I do believe, or the other way around. Either way, we need a sender advanced swapper and a receiver advanced swapper because we need to make a loop that goes through dimensions. So let's kind of break things down real quick, and let's go ahead and kind of visualize this without doing this setup just yet. Let's actually go ahead and do the process manually by utilizing the cut paste gadget. Because we're going to be dealing with amethyst buds, we are going to have to make sure that we can move them, and you can't just move them by using silk touch or anything like that. And to get that amethyst bud, yeah, believe it or not, we have this giant geode that was right in the middle of our stronghold. So all I want to do is use this and just make sure it's in cut mode, right click, shift right click, and then cut, and we can take this bud with us. And then we need to convert that bud into a budding time crystal block. And this is going to utilize that shadow pulse goo. You have to be at this tier in order to do this. So I'm going to place it right here, and let's go ahead and lower this like that. And I'm just going to place it underneath for right now. And what it's going to do is this is going to creep into it, and it will convert this block. But after it is converted, we're going to watch a couple of things happen, right? And this would be faster if we already had some way to accelerate time. But I think at this point, this is going to be well worth the time invested. So right here, it should convert and be like a light green color. Yes, very light. But we can see these like blue particles being pulled into it. And what it's doing right now, it's absorbing the energy from this dimension. Pretty neat. But as soon as it's finished, which it could take a few seconds, to take a little bit of time, 30 seconds or what have you, it will change states. There we go. So now that it is in this state, we need to move it into the nether, right? So this is where that swapper would come into play. And this is where my mind is going with this. So let's make sure we're in cut mode. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this yet again with this tool. And we just need to find a nice place in the nether. So now, for example, I have a waystone, a nice little safe area. And I want to place this in right here. So let's clear, make sure it's in the center, and you can raise it up, but this is essentially where it's going to be located, is right here. And now we have red particles going into it. It's going to be doing the same sort of thing. Perfect. It is now converted. So now that it is converted, we need to take it from here and move it into the end. And now I'm in the end islands. You can do this anywhere in the end. I just prefer it probably not in the center of your dragon island. And this will then consume. Now this is the important part, right? So as soon as this does convert, this will then be a time crystal. And this is where things get a little bit more interesting because it's at this point that it will be charged and crystal buds will start growing. But those buds that are growing, by the way, they will basically take up its charge over time. So eventually this thing will run out of time. And when it does, you have to restart the cycle. And some other things to note, you don't want to move this time crystal without taking the buds with it, like the budding amethyst or time crystals that will be growing off the sides. Because unlike normal amethyst, the time crystals have to be fully grown before they're harvested. And just like the other ones, when it's done, this is what the finished product looks like. So it's at this point now that we really got to start linking all of our stuff together and start figuring out how we're going to get this transmitted from one dimension to another. This is probably a good time to also mention this probably needs to be chunk loaded in each of these dimensions, which means that you need some more chunks probably unlocked, or definitely making sure you're utilizing what chunks you have if you're on a server for this application. So how do we actually get more force loaded chunks if you're playing in like a single player world? Well, believe it or not, there's a fancy command you can use. And this right here is the command ftb chunks admin extra force load chunks, then your username, and then set the amount of chunks that you want to have available. Of course, this is something you can always change, but this is something that I feel it has a limitation mainly for servers, not necessarily for your single player world. But keep in mind, the more chunk loaded areas you have, the worse your performance may get over time. So now after running that command, I can open up and I can go ahead and see my map here. And it now says I have 275 because by default you do get a base number of chunk loads, which I believe is like 25. So I just need to claim and chunk load. And I think this is within range. You can also scroll wheel, by the way. If you only want this to stay loaded for a certain amount of time, you can actually tell it to only stay loaded by scroll wheeling on that place. But right now it's force loaded. Then I need to make sure I do the same thing for the nether. And then we definitely need to make sure that it is done back home and make sure this area is chunk loaded. So now for the complicated part, linking our swappers together. So we need to determine if the top is going to be the sender or the bottom is going to be the placer, what have you. I think what I'm going to do is I want the top to be the one that sends to the location, the bottom be the one that takes and sends to the other location. So that means I need to start here first, and I'm just going to link this to the location that I want it to send to, which means that we're going to be sending to the swapper that's on the top in the nether. So I'll right click here to bind to this one, and then we just need to go into the nether and place this in and get it all set up, right? So the nether, and remember we're sending from the top. So I'm going to go ahead and place both of them in for right now, like this. But the wrench just needs to be right clicked on the top of this one. And so that means that this now I need to send to the end. So I'm going to right click on this. We're going to travel to the end. And this swapper, we're going to have one placed on the bottom like that, and one placed on the top like that. Beautiful. And then we need to remember this is the one sending in that is connected to the other dimension. So now that's bound. And now this one just needs to loop back around to the overworld. So I now need to click this one. And once we do this, we should have everything full circled, I do believe. And this, remember, we're going to send it to the sender. Should be ready to go. So now all of them should be bound. And they do, by the way, require power, which we're going to handle here in a minute. But before we get all the power and stuff set up, we do need to render out the area that it is going to be moving. And this is where the advanced comes into play. We want it to be centered like this, and then we're going to want to expand the size out. You can see just like this on all of the sides, like not moving this position, right? That position should stay the same, but we do want this to cover an entire area. And then we want the vertical to be covered like this. So now we have a perfect cube. And the cool part is all of the settings that we have should be just as they should. I think we want this to be set to pulse. That is exactly, I think, what we want. Everything else should be fine as well. So we just want to target blocks, and we want the blocks to be moved. We don't even need to set a filter or anything on this. And so I should be able to copy. So a shift right click to copy the settings of this block. And let's go ahead and paste these all into the bottom of all of the other ones. So for example, this, as soon as I right click, that is then pasted the settings. And you can see that we have the exact position. And I think this is just going to make life a whole lot easier. And now I just have to repeat to the one up top. I've just got to move its position down. So now it's time for, in my opinion, the really confusing part. And this might actually be kind of difficult for someone to do if they actually didn't know this existed. Now, each state that the Just Dire Things time crystal block is in is detectable from within the advanced sensor. So, since the advanced sensor, by the way, can emit a redstone signal, based on the block that it is detecting and the position that it's detecting in, we should be able to use this to send a redstone pulse, which is going to be exactly what we want to do. And so there's a couple of settings we're going to need to change, and that is going to be changing this to an allow list. Now, I believe we can bring in the budding crystal block, which is what we're going to be detecting. But notice it says right click for settings. And when we right click, this is where the important part comes into play. We do not want to look for any stage. Instead, we're actually looking for all the different stages. So if 0, in my opinion, is this stage, then we would actually want to look for stage 1 in this dimension. That means in the nether, we would want it to be stage 2. And in the end, we are actually looking for the other stage, right? Stage 3 should be the time crystal stage. However, we don't want to detect to send in that stage. We would want it to send when it's 0. So all stages will be used except for 3, believe it or not. As stage 3 is technically when it is in its fully complete time crystal stage. Of course, that's what any person would assume if they were getting into this mod for the first time. And this exactly should be the case. So what we're looking for here is 0 stage being its base bud right after it's made. And then as soon as it turns into its next tier, we want stage 1. So that is our idea. As soon as that exists, then this should emit a signal. And then with the way we have our advanced swapper set up, this is basically going to work when it receives a pulse. So once it receives that pulse, it's going to swap the position of the block, which is exactly what we want to happen. So at this point, this is now ready to go. But we do need to bring the rendering up, and we need to choose the position for where we are detecting the block. So I'm going to have to offset this 1 block back this way and bring the position up to center. And with that set, we should be good. And we can also copy the settings of this and paste that into all of the other 3. And so now if you're following along, this should also be, if we paste the settings in, it should have this. We just need to change the stage. Last one was 1. This one's now going to look for stage 2. Everything else should be the same. We just need to make sure our render position is correct. There we go. So this is looking for the change that's going to happen in this dimension. Then we need to go all the way back to the end. And like I said, this is the one that's going to be a little bit different, right? Because this is technically looking for the other way around. We paste that in, make sure that our render is correct. It is. And so technically when this time bud does run out, which it will eventually do, it doesn't look like time crystals are even growing on it right now, which is kind of weird, even though they should have grown some at this point. We are actually looking for this to fall back to its base stage. So none of this has power, so we don't have to worry about it. But stage 3, like I said, is where it's at right now. If this had power, it would be emitting a signal. But we technically want this to look for stage 0. And as soon as it's on stage 0, that's when it's going to do the block swap. Now keep in mind, what I'm showing you right here is just an example of 1 being placed down. But yes, this could be expanded to be an entire array of these time crystal blocks in an area. And this same setup should work for those. So now all this leads me into how do I power this setup? And this is kind of fantastic because we have wireless power with this energy transmitter. This is super cool. So we can use, for example, a gate, right, to send this its initial burst of power. And then we can use this transmitter to wirelessly send power to blocks that are within a range we define. I still haven't found a good solution for making this look good, but I guess for right now, what I can do is I can place a block down like this, and then I can slap a gate onto the back of it like so, and that should start to fill its buffer up with power. And then for the fun part, defining the area that it will charge a block. So just to put it in perspective, if I take this back a couple blocks, this should now be charging the block that is highlighted here. But this goes in an AoE, and we can see this area right here change. If I extend this with these, right? I extend up, or I extend left and right, we can get all of that charged. So I think taking this up vertically and then getting this to be set in the proper direction, I think will work out just fine, right? So this is charging that block up there. We go down 1. We just need to extend it up like that. And this should be charging this block and this block and this block. And perfect, they're all charged. So this can be used for just dire things, but it can also be used for other machines as well. I think this is going to be a pretty powerful tool in the future. Don't forget, the copy settings also works on this. Ooh, look at this. So we now have buds growing off the side. Oh, it's getting there. It's definitely getting there. So I'll go ahead and get this powered up as well, just like the other sides, and get everything copied in. So now's the waiting part, right? So this is where our time will now get invested, and we just have to cross our fingers and hope that the automation works. Now, there are other ways that we could accelerate this in the future, utilizing industrial foregoing, which we'll be diving into soonish. But this right here, as soon as we are able to get our first couple of crystals, which do take a bit of time, right? Because we have to wait for the budding amethyst to work. Then we can go ahead and gain access to a time wand. And then that time wand will allow us to accelerate this block. And then if this is accelerated, this whole process can kind of be jump started a little bit quicker. And then once that happens, well, then the expansion should happen. You know what? I think to kind of jumpstart this, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to cut and paste like 6 of these to wrap around. And I'm just going to manually have these generate. That way we can have several of them just also producing crystals, and maybe we'll end up accelerating the production rate. So I'm going to be utilizing a nice little grid pattern to be able to do this, just like so. And this is the pattern that you'd kind of set up. I guess this would actually work with several other things too, like sugarcane, for example. It's kind of representing the same pattern that you would do for really efficient sugarcane. And so once I have this, I will just basically be able to cut this into all the other dimensions. Now, something I did want to test out is if this actually worked. And yes, it does accelerate. Oh, the crystal blocks. That's so powerful. And this right here grants us our actual first time crystal. Actually, this could be just placed inside of here, and we could easily just harvest these blocks then in this way. This making the time crystal even more powerful. But right there is our first time crystal, the timey-wimey. And I think we are ready to go at this point. I am 100% putting this in here. By the way, when you have the time crystals in your inventory, yeah, you end up getting weird effects that are really, really bad. Just wanted to mention that. I'm going to have to break these blocks right here. And that's because I definitely, like I said, I want to get this placed in next to it. Oh, this is just kind of ridiculous that this is even possible. Let's place all of this in here. And like I said, this will move the entire setup. So the entire setup should be accelerated all the way through all of the progression parts. Oh, this is too good. Too good. Too good. Too good. All right. This, and this. And it should grow on the top and bottom. Ah, and there it went. So it finished all of the crystals. It's already made it back. These accelerated that fast. Oh, we've broken the game. This is broken. This is absolutely broken. Oh my goodness. So, like, just to understand this, I can now take this setup and I just need to put some breakers on here from Just Dire Things that automatically break this position and this position and automatically break only these crystal clusters. So for this specific automation, we have the advanced block breaker. We'll use the Celestigem pickaxe because this block breaker will actually charge this pickaxe or charge any tool that is inside of it, believe it or not. And I just need to define the time crystal into here, make sure it's on allow mode, and then we render the area and we just get this positioned where we want it, which is gonna be right in the center point right here. And then we need to raise this up until this covers the entire area. Oh, that is perfect. The only thing this block breaker should break whenever it has power, which by the way, we are going to expand. Let's see, what would be expanding this? This direction, that moves it. We want to expand, right? So put that to 1. That should get power. There we go. That is beautiful. Oh, this is all coming into play. And then I just simply turn this on and it's going to break them. And it's just going to keep doing this cycle until that center block times out, which it looks like it has it timed out. Yeah, whenever it has timed out. Hasn't. Yeah, it still hasn't timed out from what it looks like. Oh, but when it does, this will then just get all teleported, right? That's the whole point. This is going to be so fast. And then to collect these items, we'll just use a item collector from Just Dire Things as well. And we'll have this sent into a functional storage drawer for right now. This is just too much for me. Item collector, by the way, can go right here. And then this also gets like position and coordinates defined to it, which should be the same as our other block that's right in there. And that, my friends, is full time crystal automation. Oh, this is too... I'm a little taken back by the fact that the growth accelerators work on it, as if you couldn't tell. Now, for this next part, all we need is the time crystals that we currently have, and I just need to make myself a time wand, and this is crazy important, right? So, at this point, we now need to go back to our Shadow Pulse goo, and we need to do a little bit of water mechanics, essentially. So, the way that this is going to work is we just need to place some water down, so like this. And then we're going to craft up a different material called a polymorphic catalyst. This is pretty important for this, and you get 4 of them. We drop them into the water. And by the way, eventually this would be ideal to have fully automated, but here's the next part. We drop the time crystal into here. When this happens, we get time fluid. And this is the important stuff, right? So we can use a fluid container from Just Dire Things, and we can shift right click it to set it to fill mode. You can say fill mode set all, but if you just right click, we can pick this up, set our fill mode, and while the fill mode is enabled, it will fill up our wand. So we just need to keep repeating this with time fluid. But why have we done all of this in the first place? Well, this is where the crazy stuff comes into play. This is a time acceleration wand. So yes, I can shift right click on something that can be accelerated. For example, these, I do believe, and I should be able to accelerate it. Yeah, there we go. For example, that is just ridiculous. And so much like all of the other stuff, this can accelerate blocks significantly. But now I can make the insta break. Yes, I can also get this made up. It requires 2 nether stars, but you've seen how quick it was for us to take out those withers. So yeah, just a couple of withers. No biggie, right? We just gotta make sure the area is nice and clear. There we go. And let's hope actually the wither does hit some things, and let's select. Yeah, select the spell. Make sure there's no blocks in our inventory. And yeah, this guy is gonna get wrecked. Honestly, he's probably gonna go after some of these guys, which will give us wither roses, which is pretty nice. But yeah, it's time for you to go. And down the wither goes. It's so quick. I think this time I'm actually gonna spam it a bit faster. Oh my gosh, it's so much. So it's now time for one of the best upgrades, and that is the Insta Break upgrade, man, for this tool. And the way that we apply this upgrade is the smithing table. We place it in there with the upgrade, and this is now going to give us that ability, Insta Break. And we can shift right click to toggle it on and off, by the way. And it's literally Insta Break. I think Obsidian might be the best example, because Obsidian does take some time, right? But no longer. It's just a one-shot move. So very similar to the break that you can get with the All the Mods spellbook, but in a pickaxe form, which means we don't always have to have that spellbook equipped and that spell equipped. I mean, honestly, what a super cool adventure that we went on today. Like, we got time crystals automated, we got the Insta Break ability, and we got a wand that can literally accelerate blocks and time, much like the time in the bottle. However, it has to have an automation process, which is going to help us get our time in the bottle in the future. But this is going to be a great substitution till then, and I look forward to seeing the clever ways that you set this up. It's so cool. The cool ways that you set this up in your own worlds. Of course, share that in the Discord like I mentioned earlier today. And of course, guys, with that being said, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and well, give this video a huge thumbs up. Hopefully you enjoyed this automation process, and I look forward to more in the future. And guys, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that huge thanks today is going to go out to Restelia. Thank you so much for becoming a Discord premium member and of course supporting in one of the best ways possible, absolutely going above and beyond with your support. Thank you so very much. And guys, if you're interested in joining the Discord, definitely check it out. Link down in the description below. And guys, I'll see you in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.